Hi, Stephanie. Thank you. Great. Welcome. Hi, Joe. Thanks, everyone. As we're waiting for a couple people to come in, if you could just drop your name, organization, state into the chat. We're excited to have you all here today. All right, welcome all our friends from Kentucky, Iowa, New York. Great to see everyone. Let's give ourselves another minute. Okay. All right, good morning, everyone. We're just going to get started. So just drop your name, org, state in chat. And Carissa, maybe we can get started. It looks like we have a good group already here. So thanks, everyone, for being here today. My name is Vinu Aulick. I'm the Executive Director for the Medicaid Innovation Collaborative. And on behalf of the MIC, wanted to welcome you all to our research readout. So for the past few months now, we've been our research partner, Goodwin Simon Strategic Research, and working hard to talk to Medicaid beneficiaries and others who are eligible for Medicaid in your states. And the insights from this research is critical to our entire process. We believe that for this process to be meaningful, the voice of Medicaid beneficiaries has to be front and center. We're not interested in finding solutions for problems that don't exist. We really want to make sure that the problems are the real problems. And so we're really excited to hear and share with you what we learned over the last few months. The other thing that we wanted to share while we've been doing this research, and John's going to be going over this in detail, we also have kicked off a community advisory board, which is comprised of some individuals who are part of the research process and others that you helped us identify. So thank you for helping us with that. It's a great advisory panel from representation all across the states, and they're going to help us continue to provide feedback on the process, continue to make sure that both the problems that we're narrowing in on and the solutions are based and have input from their experiences as well. So if you want to go to the next slide. So what we're going to be talking about today is first just rooting us in the health equity priority that we're going to be discussing. We're going to have John and the team from Goodwin Simon share the research findings. Our hope is that we'll have some discussion, and we really, really encourage you to drop questions into chat as you're hearing the findings. And then we're going to end with sharing how the research findings that you'll be hearing is rolling into the request for information or the application that we're going to be putting out to identify solutions, and then hopefully be able to get some of your input as well. So that's what we have planned for the next hour. And then on the next page, so as you all know, this year we're working on this broad concept of social determinants of health, really looking at this, starting with this big umbrella term that's very well understood, and looking for ways to address those determinants. Ultimately, what we're hoping with this process is we are going to identify these tech-enabled solutions that are going to help close the gaps and really address these social needs. And we just pulled this framework from a great Health Affairs article, but just helping us understand what we're moving towards. So this research is key in helping us find that solutions, and it's very much based on talking to Medicare beneficiaries in New York, Iowa, Kentucky. We also have a little bit of qualitative research done from some of the folks we talked to in Nevada before. Unfortunately, Nevada had to drop out of the program, but just wanted to be transparent about that. And also wanted to thank you all who had given input on the questionnaire. It was critical in helping us narrow in. So with that, wanted to strongly encourage you again to drop any questions into chat. We're going to take a couple pauses along the way to try and get to your questions. If for some reason we're not able to get to all of them, we will follow up with email after that. So with that, I wanted to hand it over to John Whaley at the team at Goodwin Simon Strategic Research, who's been excellent partners, really a pleasure to work with, been extremely responsive and thoughtful about this process. And we'll let you take it away, John.
Thank you, Vinu, and thank you to the full team. Krista, Aisha, this has been a very collaborative effort. And also I want to echo Vinu's thanks to folks that weighed in on the survey instrument, which was extremely helpful. I'm joined by my colleagues, Amy Simon, our founding partner, and also my colleague, Andrea Hackel, who was a key research analyst on this project, and they will likely jump in and also try to field questions in the chat while the presentation is ongoing. As Vinu mentioned, I'll stop a couple of times so we can just make sure that you get a chance to ask questions. We'd love to hear your thoughts and observations. This is your area of expertise, so I'd really love to hear what you're thinking. And so with that, I'm going to jump in to the research. So let me begin with methodology. So this was a really kind of a comprehensive approach with qualitative and quantitative research. But we began the qualitative with in-depth interviews where we could really hear in a one-on-one setting about the challenges that our participants are experiencing and their reactions to some of the solutions out there. And so, as Vinu pointed out, these are not just all beneficiaries. We also included Medicaid eligible participants, and initially Nevada was included as well. Those in-depth interviews or IDIs took place in the fall and December. And then we followed that up. And I should also just mention we did those IDIs and the focus groups we did among Black, and then we had separate groups for Black, Hispanic, API, white, and then we did 2 Hispanic sessions, 1 in English, 1 in Spanish. So there was 12 IDIs and then 5 focus groups that we conducted earlier this year. And then that helped form the survey instrument that we then fielded in February, and that included 886 respondents, again, both beneficiaries and Medicaid eligible respondents from Iowa, Kentucky, and New York. We were only able to get smaller numbers in some of the smaller states. So we will show you the results by each state, since the overall results would really just be dominated by New York. And if you have questions about the methodology, please raise them in the chat and my colleagues will do their best, or we can come back to them in the Q&A. So I'll start with some broad findings. And what we saw clearly is that the struggles that our participants are facing are often very interrelated. And so first off, it's just the struggles they're facing are really extreme in terms of their ability to just pay for the very basics: food, housing, medical care, transportation. And you'll see some statistics on that when we get to the survey results. But it's really hard for us to sort of focus on a certain social determinant or social need because they're so interrelated. So if they are worried about their job, losing their job, then that's going to impact their ability to remain housed or put food on the table. And that said, though, concerns about food insecurity seem to particularly acute. So as you'll see in a moment, more than 8 in 10 respondents indicate that they often worry whether their food will run out before they got money to buy more. And that was especially the case in Iowa and Kentucky, where they expressed that more significantly. And so there's a lot of emotions around here that we saw, and I want to just also give a deep feeling of gratitude to our participants. These are people who are going through this, and we asked them to share about these experiences, and they did, in a very thoughtful way. And in fact, they were those experiences of being able to talk about these struggles were actually quite cathartic and useful for them, because in many cases they feel it's difficult to talk about these things. And I'm so glad to hear, and thank you to Aisha and Vinu and Krista for bringing some of our focus group participants into the process by having them serve on the consumer panel. And that process is both innovative and seems like it's going really well. So, because in addition to experiencing anxiety, depression, and stress, many of them feel embarrassed or judged or when they ask for help. They worry that their kids will be taken away, or if they are able to get help and are able to make a little bit more money, maybe they'll lose their benefits. And so, just as an example of this Hispanic woman in Kentucky that we interviewed, for her, she lives in a small town and she's a minority. I feel like people look at me strange because I'm Hispanic and I have kids. I know people have stereotypes of minorities leeching off the government, and I feel helpless and vulnerable when asking for help. So at the same time that they are struggling, they're also very resourceful. They have all sorts of networks that they can tap and different resources that they're trying to piece together, ways to get by. They're looking at YouTube videos to learn new skills, reaching out to family and friends, just although there's the judgment and concern there. So there's certainly a need for additional approaches. And a lot of it really comes down to money in the end. They just don't have the resources they need to pay for food, housing, transportation, healthcare, caring for others. And so a lot of the solutions that we tested, the ones that really rise to the top, are really around getting discounts and free help with things like food and utilities, housing, transportation. They also express interest in getting assistance with improving their job prospects, and I'll share some specific examples: learning new skills, getting new clothes for the job interview, et cetera. So when we showed people examples, they were pretty enthusiastic. So this gentleman in Iowa, hey, paying security deposits and first month's rent would be great for the next move I'd like to make. That would give me more confidence and that would definitely help. Or when people in the focus group talked about how for their elderly family members, they were getting rides to the doctor through Medicare programs. And that was really exciting for some of our participants who had not seen that before. This woman in Kentucky, saying for her, that sounds really nice. So sharing personal information can be a real barrier to accessing support, but we do see openness to technology. So first off, in terms of the barriers, only about half of survey respondents feel comfortable sharing information about the challenges they're experiencing. And it's both about the type of challenges and then to whom. Who are they sharing information to? And how can they trust that their information will be protected and they personally will be respected? So and it varies from participant to participant. So this woman in New York, for her, case managers and social workers are not trustworthy. You have to be careful what you tell them. People wind up putting their kids in ACS or having a case built against you, all from something that maybe you said or missaid, and they take it another way. it's just a lot of technicality with stuff. And I'm very blunt and honest. And I can't be that with all these people, except for the doctor. So for her, she had a good relationship with her doctor, but that was not true for everyone. So they were only really willing to share information with trustworthy entities who will both respect them and their privacy and protect their information. And HIPAA came up a lot. It was often cited as like a cue, like, okay, I know that there are certain people who are required by HIPAA to protect my information. And that was definitely something that made them feel better. And the mode often matters as well. So you'll see in a moment that survey respondents are much more likely to prefer communicating digitally via text, email, or online, or even filling out forms themselves than actually talking to a person who might judge them. This Black man in Kentucky, I think it's easier when you do it online. When you talk to a person, again, going back to the whole stigma thing, I feel like if you're able to do that online, it just makes it less uncomfortable. So let me go into some specific challenges around social needs. First, just overall, we have an overall question. How hard is it for you to pay for the basics like food, housing, medical care, transportation, or heating? And we see that, about half say it's extremely hard or very hard. We're just, about 10% say not hard at all. So these people are definitely struggling. We also see that differences by area. So it's much more likely that people in small towns or rural areas are likely to say that paying for the basics is extremely hard or very hard. And I talked this about how reaching out for support can often trigger people to feel shame, both internal shame, how they feel about themselves, but also feeling judged by others, and concerns about what would happen if they reach out for support. So we asked, how often does it occur when you think about reaching out for assistance? Do you feel embarrassed when you reach out for assistance or support? And we see about half or more say that they feel that very often or somewhat often. Many often feel judged when they reach out for support. They worry that if they make too much money, they'll lose their benefits, such as food stamps or disability. And the last one, it may not be as intense, but for those who feel that they worry their kids will be taken away, those are really powerful stories in the focus groups and interviews. That is an extremely, just emotional concern, and we saw that in many cases. There are also some challenges around communication. As I noted, only about half feel comfortable, and in this case, they're seeing a scale from not comfortable at all in the dark purple to very comfortable. So you see that in the dark green, there's not a lot of people who feel very comfortable talking about these challenges, not being able to find the right education or training, not being able to pay for utilities or afford household or personal items. So, but the context matters here. And you'll see in a lot of cases, I'll just kind of pause and point out that the differences by state are not so different. We do see differences in some cases by race, by area, certainly by income. The lower income people are within our low income participants are much more challenged. But by state, the differences are not so significant. And so what we see here is when we ask about the person that you would share with. So we say below are different kinds of people who may request information about your life and your circumstances when you're reaching out for assistance. How comfortable do you feel about sharing information? And again, we don't see huge numbers of people who say that they feel very comfortable sharing, and it differs by participant. Some people feel more comfortable sharing with healthcare providers or their staff especially because of HIPAA, and they have a good relationship with that provider, but that's not true for everyone. Likewise, some people had really good experiences with case managers who they felt that really they know this information, they know this world, they know can help me navigate things. So it just really depends. They're looking for a combination of expertise and warmth and empathy, and they get that from some people and not from others. In terms of opportunities to address social needs, First off, when we asked them about different assistance programs they participated in, the vast majority found those assistance programs, including Medicaid, to be very helpful. So again, looking at the dark green here, 2/3 approximately saying that they found Medicaid very helpful, even more so with SNAP. But WIC also a lot of positive views, Section 8, especially in Kentucky, other kinds of housing support. So when they take advantage of these programs, they're often perceived as quite helpful. But when it comes to sharing information, so we asked respondents, here are some different ways you could communicate with people or organizations providing assistance. Please indicate if you like this method of communicating, or if you do not like it, or if it makes no difference either way. And on this slide, you see really sort of I don't want to say impersonal, but they're both digital and examples, and also filling out a form by yourself. These are much more likely to be preferred methods of communicating than answering questions over the phone or answering questions in person. Still, a lot of people are fine with this, or it makes no difference either way. So it's not that they won't do this, but there's definitely, if I go backwards, a preference for having these digital communications. Now, that said, many really still want the option to reach a real person for follow-up questions. And also we heard that, getting that human touch also makes them feel reassured that they've been heard and that there will be action, that their matter will be taken care of. And one woman who uses the food stamp app in Kentucky just was frustrated. It's just impossible to talk to anyone. You can never find a human to talk to. So an app will only get you so far. And we saw considerable openness to technology, many in their own lives. Well, first off, they're very connected. Even though they struggle to pay for the basics, everyone had, or almost everyone had a smartphone. They found ways to pay for internet access, or found ways to access the internet, whether at another location. So they are very much online. And so some of them are already using apps, including some experience with telehealth, although not a lot. That's a whole separate issue that we could spend a whole hour on as well. But there's a lot of different apps. It's confusing how to use them. And so when we talked about some kind of information hubs where they kind of one-stop shopping, there's a lot of appetite for that. And in the focus groups, we asked them what they thought about that. And they, for them, this white woman in New York, it'd be a great thing for them to put Medicaid online, because SNAP, she had great experiences with the SNAP app, and you upload your documents onto your phone, and whatever, they need is just everything's uploaded. And she recognized that you need to have a lot of manpower to handle all the paperwork and make copies. And it's just much more effective to do everything online. In the focus groups, we had people actually look at, we gave them the link to findhelp.org, and they took a look at it. And a lot of positive reactions to this. They started to kind of pick it apart afterwards, but just initially, here's this gentleman in New York. I thought that the fact that all the different services are under one banner was pretty good, pretty easy. The user interface looks clear with the little icons and everything. And then I love this part, because this gets to, it feels personal. It's meeting people where they are. One thing that stood out was that you can change it to any language. It had dozens of languages. My family's from Haiti, so I checked the Haitian Creole, and it looks good. I thought that was a big plus. So they're looking for information that's both useful, but they're expecting information also to be tailored to their needs. So I'm going to pause for a moment before diving into some more detailed findings. But people feel free to either speak to the chat or just go ahead and unmute.
So John, there's a couple of questions. Maybe I can start. So
right, thank you.
Anna had asked about, did the idea of cash transfers come up?
Not explicitly that I recall. There's certainly a desire for assistance where, if it said discounted or free as part of it, That was a huge plus. But there was not, from their standpoint, there was not a explicit request or discussion about cash transfers.
There was also another number of questions around, so were language barriers considered as it relates to communication, information sharing preferences, and were all participants native English speaking?
So we did separate groups by English and Spanish. So I would say that, like, for example, in our Hispanic focus group or IDIs in English, they may not have been necessarily native speaking, but they were fluent in Spanish. The survey was only in English, so just being transparent about that. But we had people with sort of range of backgrounds. But that was kind of how we handled language. I will say that language is certainly a barrier. That was a discussion, both because it's hard to communicate, but also it can be stigmatizing, as was immigration status. So there are other sort of barriers I haven't talked about yet that are true barriers.
Okay, I know we have more to get through. Should we keep going and then come back to the questions?
Let's do that. So I'll go ahead and share again. And just to dive in, and I'll move through this quickly so there's time for Q&A. So first off, I'm just going to talk about some specific challenges around food. So we asked people, we gave them two statements that some people have made about their food situation, and asked them, for them, whether this was often true, sometimes true, or never true. And we varied the question depending on whether it was just they were solo in the house or whether there were other people in the household. So one statement, are we worried about whether our food would run out before we got money to buy more? And we see that for our participants in Kentucky and Iowa, over half say that is often true for them. The food we bought just didn't last and we didn't have enough money to get more. About half in Kentucky and Iowa especially say that's often true. So that's a pretty severe situation. And there's a lot of focus on not just, it's about a lot of how they juggle their life is how to just get enough food. And so they're very conscious about prices and buying affordable foods. And even if they had enough food, they didn't always have the right kind of food. They were very focused on nutrition, wanting to make sure they had access to fruits and vegetables that were fresh. And they knew that was important. And just some of these quotes, for example, this one in the lower right, for this one woman in Kentucky, it was just a choice about what to pay for. Do you pay the light bill, or do you get groceries? Do you pay for the medication? So these are the kinds of daily sort of calculations that they have to make. There are also opportunities around food. So when we talked about different kinds of support, and we asked our survey respondents how helpful each of these would be, we see that about half say it would be very helpful to get discounts on food, especially food that they can prepare at a later time. Lots of people also think it would be helpful to get discounts on ready-to-eat meals, but people like the idea to also be able to prepare themselves. Also interested in online cooking classes and nutrition coaching, but mostly it's about getting a discount on the food itself. And also there are challenges that we heard about when it comes to jobs and education. And this slide can be interpreted a few ways. And at first glance, it looks like, most people say that they've got a pretty stable job. Over half say it's somewhat stable or very stable. But I think what we heard in the focus groups and in-depth interviews is the job itself matters. Many people didn't have a job that they felt was the kind of job that they wanted, or a job that paid sufficient resources. And if you think about your job, really it's the top response here, the dark green. Anything other than feeling like their job is very stable, makes you feel really insecure. So just having a somewhat stable job is not a good place to be. But there are opportunities in this realm, and people expressed a lot of interest in, when we asked people to choose, we gave them a list of different work supports and services. The most helpful ones were getting assistance finding job opportunity, learning new skills, and it varied by state in this case. So for example, these are ranked by New York, but you see that, for example, in Kentucky and Iowa, getting clothing for an interview job was much more important for them. Also interest in getting assistance preparing for interviews and getting childcare while I'm at work, especially in Kentucky and Iowa. Just to hear some of their own words, in terms of what would be useful, evenings would be best, and online and getting things recorded. Because things come up, they work multiple jobs and they couldn't always make a class. Internship programs were seen as being very beneficial, and getting sort of training, apprenticeship programs were seen as really valuable. We also explored supports and assistance in terms of housing and transportation. You see a lot of receptivity to assistance paying for utilities, assistance paying for rent, security deposit for first and last, also preparing for winter or summer. Within the transportation realm, getting money back for gas or bus and train fares, and then getting free or discounted ride-sharing services. So before I go to Q&A and the larger discussion, I just want to talk about some of the implications we are seeing in terms of solutions. First off, there's an openness. These folks are looking for solutions. They do this every day. They're trying to figure out who they can, get a ride from, who knows about a job, who can take care of their kids while they go look for a job. Is the food bank have the right kind of food that I need? So they're always looking for solutions. There's no question there. But what they're looking for is solutions that really address their own personal needs that are both considerable and multiple and interrelated. But in order to have the exchange of information necessary, which they understand is necessary, they need to share about their own personal experiences. That's fine, that's a given, but it needs to be done in a very respectful, trustworthy way. So the solutions that we approach them with need to demonstrate that trust and respect and that empathy. They're looking for a combination of expertise and empathy. So to that goal, it can be very helpful to hear from others. Who is going to provide a testimonial to our participants that these are services that will meet your needs and also respect you. So if your solutions as part of that can also provide testimonials that model that kind of caring that's non-judgmental, I think that would be very important to do, whether it's a quote on a new website or some like real person who can talk about how others have been helped. That would be really important. And that while we see a lot of openness to technology, and in some cases a preference for technology over interpersonal interaction, they still want a person to be there to reach out to help show that they're being heard, that action will be taken. They're looking for reassurance, and really that's can really only come from a human being. Just to leave you with some quotes here, this reaction to seeing findhelp.org, and again, we're not trying to promote Find Help, but it was just an example we showed them. For this woman, it was like a dictionary. It just had all these different resources and services. She found it amazing and user-friendly. Another API woman in Iowa loved it. It was simple, it was easy to navigate, but she had questions about the motivation, like, what's the catch here? How easy is this really going to be? There's a lot of skepticism. And then the Hispanic woman speaks to the need to keep information up to date. She loved it, and she liked being able to type in her zip code. And then a community garden popped up, but then it was somewhere in Virginia. So then that's just a cue that this is actually not speaking to her, and then distrust is triggered. So with that,